Joining me now is Dr. Brian Nichol, and we're going to discuss ADHD and cannabis. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Nichol.
Oh, Wendy, thanks for having me back again. It's good to see you.
Yes, great to see you. We love your music and cannabis pairings, of course.
Well, that's so
Uh,
much fun to do. It really is.
yes, I bet. But we don't always get to chat with you. I really wanted to get your take. We're talking about ADHD this week, and I'd love to get your thoughts about use of cannabis to treat ADHD. Let's talk first, perhaps about adults, and then we can talk about children as well.
Well, I think as far as ADD and ADHD, kind of view them as the same type of thing, really. Really, a lot of patients do respond to cannabis. One of the interesting things as cannabis has become legal in the state of Arkansas, at any rate, is patients coming in for their medical cards. The adults, when I speak to them, I'll ask them about previous cannabis use. I'm amazed at the number of adults that have been using cannabis since their teens. Initially they thought perhaps they were just using it recreationally. When you talk to them over a period of time, you find out, well, really, they were self-medicating, as we call it, using cannabis to treat their ADD and ADHD symptoms. They actually saw an improvement with cannabis. Oh, they might have thought they were just partying with it. The reason
Mhm.
they stuck with it is because it actually did help some of their symptoms. So anecdotally, a lot of patients have been using it for treatment of ADD symptoms quite successfully.
Nice.
As for the more focused medical use, I do think it has a place in it.
So how would it work for someone with ADHD? Does it calm their nervous system, or what is the mechanism of it working for that diagnosis?
Well, the actual mechanism, who really can say? I think
Mhm.
some of it is it really does help improve focus on
Okay.
what you're doing, where you're less distracted by the things that normally distract people with ADD. For me, it's anything shiny over here I see, and I'm over chasing after it, unfortunately.
Uh-huh.
CBD seems to help patients focus in on things and be less distracted. Typically, there's some anxiety and depression associated with ADD. CBD is quite effective at moderating those symptoms in a lot of patients. One of the things I found of particular use is certain terpenes. I use pinene in particular, seems
Hmm.
to really help with focus and attention with people with ADD. Wendy, I'll tell you, my mother, she's getting ready to turn 80 here very soon. She still works. She's in the magazine
Good
publishing
for
business,
her. Nice.
works remote from home.
Uh-huh.
When I started using CBD and pinene to control my symptoms several years ago, I gave my mom a little taste of it. Yeah, she won't live without it now. She says it
Hmm.
keeps her laser focused on things,
Nice. Uh-huh.
does make her a little bit bitchy to become impatient with people as far as getting to the point on things because you're finally thinking clear in a more focused manner.
Uh-huh.
That's the biggest side effect I see with that combination of CBD and pinene. I do believe that a THC component does help people with ADD. For many patients, just smoking cannabis or using THC tinctures is one way to do that. However, a lot of patients seem to do fine on relatively low dose THC, that you will find in a full spectrum CBD tincture.
Hmm.
As I use, I find that more than adequate to control most of my symptoms.
Nice. So when we talk about children and cannabis, there's lots of controversy for many people. However, kids who are on medications, pharmaceutical drugs for ADHD, they're pretty heavy duty drugs. So I wondered what your thoughts were about using cannabis for ADHD in someone who's underage, under 18, to treat these symptoms, and if it perhaps could even be safer. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Well, when it comes down to the whole idea of using THC in children, the big concern we have as physicians is that uh, THC is very much involved, intimately involved in the immune system. There's something called brain remodeling that occurs in children and adolescents up to about the age of, oh gosh, 22, 24 years old, maybe,
Mhm.
where different connections in the brains are established and other ones are essentially pruned. I think that's one of the reasons why adolescence is so tough for people. Your brain really is kind of screwed up, going through a lot of changes.
Mm-hmm.
The particular cells involved in this process are called glial cells. These glial cells expose a lot of the, I won't get too deep in the weeds, but a particular receptor, the CB1R receptor that THC actually interacts with.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that when you administer THC to kids that are undergoing this brain remodeling, you may actually interfere with the connections that are
Mm-hmm.
being made and are being pruned, which could lead to issues. Um, there are statistically significant numbers that seem to show that schizophrenia may be increased in children and adolescents who use cannabis. It's not definitive data and all this, but it does give us pause as far as recommending THC to these individuals. You come down onto the whole risks versus benefit things as
Mm-hmm.
far as cannabis goes versus all other medications too. In my opinion, using very low dose THC in these children, the benefit outweighs the risk. Always you
Mm-hmm.
want to try to get by in the lowest amount of THC as you possibly can in these kids. When we start examining the risk versus benefit ratio of cannabis and THC versus that of, as you mentioned, the medications we prescribe to children for ADD and ADHD, particularly the amphetamine class of drugs, and they
Mm-hmm.
have very, very, very significant side effects.
Right.
And I have a lot of pause about using those in children too. And
Mm-hmm.
if I compare the two, and this is strictly my opinion now,
Sure.
when you look at the risks and benefits of cannabis on one side of the scales and the risks and benefits of the amphetamine class of drugs on the other side of the scales, to me, it kind of tilts you towards the acceptance of low dose THC as being preferable to
Mm-hmm.
that of the prescribed drugs. Again, that is just my opinion. I'm sure you can find a lot of dissenting opinions to that.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for giving us your opinion on that. I think it's a subject that can be controversial, but knowing the a little bit of the science and like you said, we have to look at that. I think for all things that we ingest, the benefit risk ratio, figure out if the benefit outweighs the risk and make choices accordingly. So thank you so much for that
Sure.
information. Thanks for joining me today. How can people get in touch with you?
Wendy, we're always available at our website at cannabisexpertmd.com. And don't forget to follow us so you don't miss anything on
Mhm.
Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter under Cannabis Expert MD. In fact, we've got coming out this week, I think, new Canna chef in Little Rock is starting to share some of his recipes with them. So don't miss it.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for letting us know. Take care.